age of exploration. The vastness of space was like nothing the human mind could comprehend. It was a place of infinite mystery, where anything could happen and everything was possible. But for the intrepid space explorer, that was precisely the appeal. There was nothing they wanted more than to go beyond the limits of what was known and discover the unknown. The protagonist, a space explorer by the name of Captain Jameson, was one such adventurer. He had spent his entire life dreaming of exploring the far reaches of the universe, and now he was about to embark on the most daring mission of his career. The mission was simple in its objective, but complex in its execution. Captain Jameson and his crew were tasked with venturing beyond the edge of explored space to see what lay beyond. It was a journey that had never been attempted before, and one that came with a great deal of risk. As Captain Jameson and his crew prepared for launch, the air crackled with tension. The ship was packed with state-of-the-art technology and equipment, but even the most advanced tools could not prepare them for the unknown they were about to face. The crew consisted of the best and brightest minds from around the world. They had spent months training and preparing for the mission, but none of them knew what lay ahead. They were stepping into the void, into the abyss, with nothing but their wits and their courage to guide them. Captain Jameson took one last look around the ship before giving the signal to launch. The engines roared to life, and the ship lifted off the launch pad, hurtling into the sky. As they broke through the atmosphere, Captain Jameson felt a thrill of excitement mixed with fear. He knew that the risks were great, but the rewards could be even greater. He was about to explore a place that no human had ever seen before, and that thought alone was enough to keep him going. As the ship hurtled through space, Captain Jameson and his crew monitored their instruments, scanning the darkness for any signs of what lay ahead. But there was nothing. Just endless blackness stretching out before them like an infinite void. The hours turned into days as the ship traveled deeper into uncharted space. The crew was on edge, knowing that at any moment they could encounter something that could threaten their mission, or even their lives. But then, something happened. A blip appeared on the radar, a faint signal that could only mean one thing: they had found something. Captain Jameson gave the order to change course, and the ship veered off in the direction of the signal. As they got closer, the signal grew stronger, until finally, they saw it. A massive, swirling vortex of energy that seemed to be sucking everything around it into its depths. It was like nothing they had ever seen before. Captain Jameson's heart raced with excitement as he realized what they had found. This was it, the edge of explored space. They had discovered something new, something incredible. But then, the ship began to shake violently. The vortex had caught them in its grip, and there was nothing they could do to escape. The ship was being pulled closer and closer to the vortex's event horizon, where even light could not escape. Captain Jameson frantically tried to engage the engines, but they were no match for the vortex's immense gravitational pull. The ship was being torn apart, piece by piece, as it hurtled toward the event horizon. And then, suddenly, everything went dark. The crew was thrown forward as the ship came to a sudden stop. The vortex was gone, replaced by an impenetrable darkness that seemed to stretch on forever. Captain Jameson struggled to regain his bearings, his heart pounding in his chest. They had survived the ordeal, but they were now in uncharted territory. They had gone beyond the edge of explored space and had encountered something that defied all logic and reason. The crew scrambled to assess the damage to the ship, but it quickly became apparent that they were in a bad situation. The ship's systems were failing, and they had no way of communicating with the outside world. They were completely alone. Captain Jameson knew that they had to act fast if they were going to survive. They had to find a way to repair the ship and get back to civilization before they ran out of supplies. The crew worked tirelessly, using every bit of their training and expertise to repair the ship. They scoured every inch of the vessel, looking for anything that could be salvaged or repurposed. And slowly but surely, the ship began to come back to life. But as they worked, Captain Jameson couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. He had the distinct impression that they were not alone in this dark, uncharted corner of the universe. It wasn't long before his suspicions were confirmed. One night, as the crew was taking a break from their repairs, they heard a strange noise coming from outside the ship. It was a low, rumbling sound, like something massive moving through the darkness. Captain Jameson quickly ordered everyone back inside the ship and sealed the airlock. But as they waited in the darkness, the noise grew louder and more intense. And then, suddenly, the ship was hit with a massive force, shaking it to its very core. Captain Jameson knew that they were under attack. He ordered the crew to arm themselves and prepare for a fight. But when they looked outside the ship, they saw something that they could never have imagined. A massive, alien ship had attached itself to theirs, like a giant leech. It was covered in strange, glowing symbols that pulsed with an otherworldly energy. And from within the ship, they could see strange, shadowy figures moving about, like ghosts in the darkness. Captain Jameson knew that they were outmatched. They had no weapons that could penetrate the alien ship's defenses, and they were running low on supplies. It was only a matter of time before they were overwhelmed. But then, something incredible happened. The alien ship suddenly detached from theirs and disappeared into the darkness. Captain Jameson and his crew were left alone once again, battered and bruised but alive. As they made their way back to civilization, Captain Jameson couldn't help but wonder what lay beyond the edge of explored space. What other wonders, and terrors, were out there waiting to be discovered? And would he have the courage to face them when the time came? The experience had left a deep impact on Captain Jameson and his crew. They had witnessed something that defied all their knowledge and understanding of the universe. And as they made their way back home, they knew that they had to share their story with the world. But when they arrived back on Earth, they were met with skepticism and disbelief. The scientific community dismissed their claims as fantasy, and the government refused to fund any further exploration beyond the edge of space. Captain Jameson was frustrated by this response. He knew that what they had seen was real, and that there was so much more out there waiting to be discovered. But he also knew that he couldn't do it alone. He began to gather a team of like-minded individuals, people who shared his passion for exploration and discovery. Together, they formed a new organization, dedicated to pushing the boundaries of what was known and exploring the uncharted corners of the universe. Their first mission was to return to the edge of space, to the very spot where they had encountered the alien ship. They knew that it was a dangerous mission, but they also knew that it was necessary. As they approached the edge of space, they felt a sense of excitement and trepidation. They knew that they were entering into the unknown, and that anything could happen. But what they found there was beyond anything they could have imagined. The edge of space was not a barrier, but a gateway. A portal to other dimensions, other worlds, and other beings. Captain Jameson and his crew stepped through the portal, into a world beyond their wildest dreams. They encountered beings of all shapes and sizes, creatures of light and darkness, and worlds that defied all understanding. They spent months exploring this new realm, learning everything they could about it. And when they returned to Earth, they brought with them knowledge that would change the course of human history. Captain Jameson had found his true purpose, and he knew that he would spend the rest of his life exploring the uncharted corners of the universe. For him, there was no greater thrill, no greater adventure, than the edge of exploration. Interstellar dreams. The stars had always held a fascination for humanity. For as long as we could remember, we had gazed up at the night sky, wondering what lay beyond the twinkling lights that we could see with our naked eye. But it wasn't until the advent of space travel that we truly began to explore the vast expanse of the universe. And even then, our journeys were limited by the constraints of technology and physics. But for one man, that wasn't enough. Jack Hastings had always dreamed of going further, of exploring the furthest reaches of the cosmos. And so, he set his sights on a seemingly impossible goal: interstellar travel. For years, Jack worked tirelessly on his project, pouring all his resources into the development of a revolutionary new spacecraft. It was a vessel unlike any other, powered by a cutting-edge propulsion system that could take it to speeds never before seen. But even with the best technology at his disposal, Jack knew that he couldn't do it alone. He needed a crew, people who shared his passion and drive to reach for the stars. And so, he put out a call for volunteers, seeking out the brightest and most dedicated individuals from across the globe. It wasn't long before he had assembled a team of scientists, engineers, and explorers, each one ready and willing to risk everything for the chance to make history. The day of the launch was a tense one, filled with nerves and excitement. Jack and his crew knew that they were embarking on a journey unlike any other, one that would take them to the very edge of what was known. But as they soared through the void of space, Jack's dreams began to take shape. They flew past planets and stars that had never been seen before, and encountered phenomena that defied all explanation. The crew worked tirelessly, collecting data and samples from their surroundings, analyzing every bit of information they could gather. And as they did so, Jack knew that they were making history. But it wasn't until they encountered a strange, glowing object on the edge of a distant star system that Jack's dreams truly came to fruition. The object was unlike anything they had ever seen. A massive structure that seemed to pulsate with a strange, alien energy. As they approached the structure, Jack knew that they were about to make contact with something truly incredible. And as they stepped out of their ship and onto the surface of the object, they were greeted by a sight that would stay with them for the rest of their lives. A group of beings, unlike any that they had ever encountered before, stood before them. They were humanoid in shape, but their skin was a shimmering silver and their eyes glowed with an otherworldly light. For a moment, Jack and his crew stood there in awe, not knowing what to do. But then, one of the beings stepped forward and spoke to them, in a language that they could somehow understand. They learned that the beings were from a far-off planet, one that had been destroyed by a catastrophic event. And they had been searching for a new home, a new planet to call their own. It was then that Jack knew what he had to do. He had to help these beings, to give them a chance at a new life. And so, he offered them the chance to travel with him and his crew, to explore the universe together and find a new home. It was a risky decision, but one that Jack knew was right. And as they set off once again into the void of space, he knew that his dreams had finally become a reality. But the journey ahead was not an easy one. Traveling with the alien beings brought new challenges and dangers that the crew had never faced before. They encountered hostile forces who saw the aliens as a threat and sought to eliminate them. There were times when Jack and his crew were forced to make difficult decisions to protect themselves and their new companions. Yet despite the obstacles they faced, Jack and the alien beings grew closer, learning from each other and discovering the vastness of the universe together. They visited strange and beautiful worlds, encountered new forms of life, and experienced wonders beyond their wildest imaginations. And as they continued on their journey, Jack knew that they were part of something truly special. They were not just exploring the universe, they were building bridges between worlds and forming bonds that would last for generations. But eventually, all journeys must come to an end. Jack and his crew knew that they could not travel forever, that they had to find a home of their own. And so, they embarked on a new mission, one that would take them to the far reaches of the universe in search of a new planet to call their own. It was a daunting task, but Jack and his crew were determined to see it through. They faced new challenges and dangers at every turn, but they persevered, driven by the hope of finding a new home for themselves and their alien companions. And after years of traveling, they finally found what they were looking for. A beautiful planet, rich with resources and teeming with life. It was a paradise, a new beginning for all of them. And as they landed on the surface of the planet, Jack knew that his dreams had finally been fulfilled. He had gone beyond the boundaries of what was known, traveled to the edges of the universe, and discovered wonders beyond his wildest imaginings. But more than that, he had built something truly remarkable, a new community of beings from across the stars, united by the common goal of exploration and discovery. As they set up their new home, Jack looked out at the endless expanse of space, knowing that there were still countless mysteries to be unraveled, still more worlds to explore. And he smiled, knowing that the journey would never truly be over. For Jack and his crew, this new planet was just the beginning of a new chapter in their interstellar journey. They worked tirelessly to build a thriving community, one that would be home to both humans and alien beings alike. They shared their knowledge and technology, exchanging ideas and resources in order to build a world that was truly unified. But as time passed, Jack couldn't help but feel a sense of restlessness. He longed for the feeling of adventure, the thrill of the unknown that had driven him all those years ago. He knew that there were still so many secrets waiting to be uncovered in the vast expanse of space. And so, he began to plan a new mission. This time, he would travel alone, embarking on a solo journey of discovery that would take him to the very edges of the universe. It was a risky endeavor, one that could result in Jack never returning to his new home. But he couldn't ignore the call of the stars, the pull of the unknown that had driven him all those years ago. And so, he set off in his spacecraft, alone and determined. As he traveled deeper and deeper into the unknown, Jack encountered new wonders and dangers beyond his wildest imaginings. He navigated treacherous asteroid fields, fought off hostile alien forces, and explored strange and mysterious planets. But despite the dangers, Jack never lost sight of his goal. He was driven by a desire to learn and discover, to push the boundaries of what was known and explore the uncharted depths of space. And in the end, it was that determination that saved him. When he finally returned to his new home, battered and bruised but triumphant, He knew that he had achieved something truly remarkable. He had gone beyond the edges of exploration, pushing the limits of what was possible and charting new territory in the vast expanse of space. And even though he had faced countless challenges and dangers along the way, he knew that it was all worth it for the thrill of discovery, for the chance to explore the universe and uncover its secrets. For Jack, there would always be a new horizon to chase, a new adventure waiting just beyond the edges of the known universe. And he would always be ready to answer the call of the stars, to venture forth and discover what lay beyond. And so, Jack continued his interstellar journeys, exploring the vast universe and discovering new wonders at every turn. He traveled to distant galaxies, encountering strange new forms of life and uncovering ancient secrets that had been hidden for eons. He visited exotic worlds that defied imagination, from glittering crystalline planets to barren, lifeless wastelands. He encountered beings of immense power and intelligence, and witnessed the birth and death of entire star systems. But despite all of the wonders he encountered, Jack never forgot his home, the planet he had helped to build and the community of beings that had become his family. Even as he traveled to the furthest reaches of the universe, he knew that his true purpose was to bring back knowledge and discoveries that could help his home world thrive. And so, he returned time and time again, bringing with him new technologies and ideas that transformed his world into a utopia of science and progress. He shared his knowledge and experiences with his fellow travelers, inspiring a new generation of explorers to venture forth and discover the unknown. And as the years passed, Jack realized that his true legacy would not be the wonders he had discovered or the feats he had accomplished. It would be the community of beings he had helped to build, the bonds he had forged across the vast expanse of space. For in the end, it was not the thrill of adventure or the excitement of discovery that truly mattered. It was the connection he had made with the universe, the understanding he had gained of its mysteries and wonders, and the community of beings he had brought together in the name of exploration and discovery. And so, Jack continued his interstellar journeys, always seeking new horizons and discovering new wonders. But he knew that his true home was not a planet or a spaceship, but the vast expanse of the universe itself, and the endless possibilities it held for those brave enough to venture forth and explore its mysteries. The launch. The day had finally arrived. After years of planning, designing, building, and testing, the launch of the spacecraft was at hand. The crew stood on the launch pad, their hearts pounding with excitement and anticipation. The spacecraft was a marvel of modern engineering, a sleek and elegant vessel designed to transport its crew to the furthest reaches of space. It was equipped with the latest technology, from advanced propulsion systems to state-of-the-art sensors and communication arrays. The crew had spent countless hours training for this moment, studying every aspect of the mission and preparing for every possible scenario. They knew that the journey ahead would be fraught with danger and uncertainty, but they were ready for the challenge. As the countdown began, the crew stood at attention, their eyes fixed on the spacecraft towering above them. The engines roared to life, the sound echoing across the launch pad and shaking the ground beneath their feet. Slowly, the spacecraft lifted off the launch pad, rising higher and higher into the sky. The crew felt the intense G-forces pressing down on them as the craft accelerated towards the edge of the atmosphere. As they breached the outer reaches of Earth's atmosphere, the crew felt weightless for the first time, their bodies floating freely in the cabin. They looked out the windows of the spacecraft, marveling at the breathtaking view of the Earth below. But there was no time to linger on the view. The crew had a mission to complete, a journey to undertake. They began to focus on the task at hand, checking and double-checking the spacecraft's systems and preparing for the long journey ahead. For hours, they traveled through the black void of space, the stars and planets stretching out endlessly before them. They monitored the ship's systems and made minor adjustments as needed, working together seamlessly to keep the craft on course. As they neared their destination, the crew's excitement grew. They knew that they were about to embark on an incredible journey, one that would take them to places no human had ever been before. Finally, the moment arrived. The spacecraft came to a stop, hovering above a distant planet, its surface obscured by a thick layer of clouds. The crew prepared to make the final descent, their hearts pounding with excitement and anticipation. As the spacecraft descended towards the planet's surface, the crew felt the intense heat of re-entry, the spacecraft's shields protecting them from the intense temperatures. They could feel the craft shaking as it pierced through the clouds, hurtling towards the surface below. Finally, the spacecraft landed, its engines kicking up a cloud of dust and debris. The crew breathed a collective sigh of relief, their hearts still pounding with the adrenaline of the descent. They stepped out of the craft, their feet touching down on the surface of a new world. They looked around, taking in the sights and sounds of this strange and wondrous place. For the crew, this was just the beginning of an incredible journey. One that would take them to the very edges of the universe and beyond. But for now, they were content to bask in the glory of their achievement. The successful launch of their spacecraft and the start of an incredible adventure. The crew set to work immediately, unloading equipment and setting up their base camp. They knew that their time on this planet would be limited, and they needed to make the most of every moment. As they worked, they couldn't help but feel a sense of wonder and awe. This planet was unlike any they had ever seen before. With strange rock formations, alien flora and fauna, and a sky that glowed with hues of pink and purple. Despite the unfamiliarity of their surroundings, the crew quickly fell into a routine. They conducted experiments, gathered samples, and explored the surrounding terrain, always pushing the boundaries of what they knew about this new world. As they worked, the crew began to notice strange phenomena that they couldn't explain. At first, it was small things, like the way their equipment would occasionally malfunction or the strange noises they would hear at night. But as time went on, the anomalies became more frequent and more disturbing. The crew would see strange shapes in the distance, only for them to disappear when they approached. They would hear voices on their radios that didn't belong to any of them. As the days passed, the crew began to feel like they were being watched, like they were not alone on this planet. They couldn't shake the feeling that something was out there, something that was watching them, studying them, waiting for the right moment to strike. Despite their growing unease, the crew pressed on with their work, determined to uncover the secrets of this strange and wondrous planet. But as they delved deeper into the mysteries of this world, they began to realize that they might have bitten off more than they could chew. One night, as they sat around their campfire, they heard a sound that chilled them to the bone. It was a low, guttural growl, like nothing they had ever heard before. They looked around nervously, their hands reaching for their weapons. Then, out of the darkness, emerged a creature unlike anything they had ever seen. It was massive, with razor-sharp teeth and claws that glinted in the moonlight. It let out another ferocious growl and charged towards them. The crew acted quickly, firing their weapons and dodging the creature's attacks. They managed to fend it off, but they knew that they were in serious trouble. They were no longer just explorers on a strange and distant planet. They were in a fight for their lives. As the crew retreated back to their base camp, they knew that they were facing an enemy that they were not prepared for. They were on the edge of exploration, and they had just crossed over into the realm of the unknown. The crew spent the next few days fortifying their camp and preparing for the inevitable return of the creature. They knew that they had to find a way to protect themselves if they were going to survive on this planet. As they worked, they began to piece together the puzzle of the planet's mysteries. They discovered ancient ruins that hinted at an advanced civilization that had once thrived on this world. They found artifacts and relics that suggested that the planet had been visited by extraterrestrial beings. But even as they uncovered the planet's secrets, they knew that they were not safe. The creature continued to stalk them, always just out of sight, always waiting for the right moment to attack. The crew worked tirelessly to come up with a plan to defeat the creature. They analyzed its behavior and studied its movements, trying to find a weakness that they could exploit. They scoured their equipment for anything that could help them in their fight, and they came up with a daring plan. They would lure the creature into a trap, using themselves as bait. They knew that it was risky, but they also knew that it was their best chance of defeating the creature once and for all. They set their plan in motion, and as they waited for the creature to arrive, they steeled themselves for the fight to come. They armed themselves with everything they had, and they waited for the creature to show itself. And then, it was there. The creature charged towards them, and the crew sprang into action. They fired their weapons, using every ounce of skill and courage they had to fight back against the beast. The battle was fierce and intense, and the crew began to fear that they might not make it out alive. But then, one of them noticed something strange about the creature. It seemed to be slowing down, its movements becoming sluggish and erratic. And then, it collapsed to the ground, dead. The crew cheered in triumph, knowing that they had defeated the creature that had been stalking them for so long. They took samples of its remains and analyzed them, hoping to uncover the secrets of its biology and behavior. As they worked, the crew realized that they had accomplished something truly remarkable. They had pushed the boundaries of what was known about this planet, and they had overcome incredible odds to survive. They knew that there was still so much to explore and discover on this world. But they were ready for whatever challenges lay ahead. They were explorers, adventurers, and pioneers, and they would never stop pushing the boundaries of what was possible. With the creature defeated, the crew felt a renewed sense of hope and purpose. They continued to explore the planet, discovering new wonders and mysteries at every turn. They came across vast underground caverns, filled with strange and exotic life forms. They encountered towering mountains and deep valleys, all shrouded in a thick, alien mist. And as they journeyed further into the heart of the planet, they began to uncover evidence of an even greater mystery. They found strange artifacts and ruins that suggested that there was something more to this planet than they had ever imagined. The crew knew that they had to investigate further, to unlock the secrets of the planet and the civilization that had once thrived there. They worked tirelessly, analyzing every clue and piece of evidence, piecing together a puzzle that had been hidden for eons. And then, one day, they found it. The key to the mystery that had eluded them for so long. A strange device that seemed to be a gateway to another world. The crew stared in awe at the device, realizing that it could be the key to unlocking the secrets of the universe itself. They knew that they had to activate it, to take the next step in their journey of discovery. With trembling hands, they activated the device, and a blinding light filled the room. When the light faded, they found themselves in a strange, new world. A world unlike any they had ever seen before. The crew knew that they had found what they had been searching for. A new frontier, a new world to explore and discover. They knew that they would never stop pushing the boundaries of what was possible. That they would always be explorers, adventurers, and pioneers. For they had gone beyond the edge of exploration, into a world of interstellar dreams. The long haul. Captain Tyler stood at the helm of the starship, his gaze fixed on the endless expanse of space before him. He had been on this ship for what felt like an eternity, traveling across the vast reaches of the galaxy on a mission that had already taken years. The crew was tired, worn down by the endless monotony of life on the ship. They had been in cryogenic sleep for most of the journey, waking only for brief periods to check the ship's systems and make sure that everything was still functioning properly. But even in their waking moments, the crew felt the weight of the journey bearing down on them. The endless expanse of space, the unchanging routine of life on the ship, the isolation from the rest of the universe. They had been traveling for so long that they had lost track of time. Days, months, years all blended together into an endless, monotonous stream of consciousness. But Captain Tyler knew that they couldn't give up. They had a mission to complete, a goal that they had been working towards for so long. They were the vanguard of humanity, the first to venture beyond the boundaries of their own galaxy, and they had a responsibility to see it through. The ship hummed and vibrated beneath them, the engines working tirelessly to propel them ever closer to their destination. But even with the best technology available to them, the journey was still a long haul, a grueling test of endurance and perseverance. As they traveled, the crew began to dream of the world that awaited them at the end of their journey. A world that was filled with wonder and possibility. A world that would make all of their sacrifices and hardships worth it in the end. But as the days turned into weeks, and the weeks turned into months, the crew began to realize that the journey was taking a toll on them. They missed their families, their friends, the world they had left behind. They missed the sun on their faces, the smell of fresh air, the feeling of grass beneath their feet. They missed the simple pleasures of life that they had taken for granted before they had embarked on this mission. And yet, they continued on, pushing through the endless void of space, fueled by the hope and determination that had brought them this far. As the ship hurtled through the darkness, Captain Tyler knew that they were nearing the end of their journey. Soon, they would arrive at their destination, and they would finally be able to step out of the ship and onto the world that awaited them. But even as the end drew near, the captain knew that the long haul was not over. They would have to continue pushing the boundaries of what was possible, exploring new worlds and uncovering new mysteries. For they were explorers, adventurers, and pioneers, and the long haul was just the beginning of their journey. Captain Tyler turned to his crew, a sense of pride swelling within him. They had endured so much, faced countless challenges and obstacles, and yet they had persevered. "Attention all crew," he announced over the intercom. "We are approaching our destination. I know that this journey has been long and difficult, but we have made it this far because of our determination and resolve. We are explorers, pioneers, and adventurers, and our mission is not yet complete. We must continue to push the boundaries of what is possible, to explore new worlds and uncover the secrets of the universe. The long haul may be over, but our journey is just beginning. So let us prepare ourselves for what lies ahead, for the next great adventure that awaits us." The crew responded with a resounding cheer, their weariness momentarily forgotten in the excitement of the moment. They knew that they had a lot of work ahead of them, but they were ready for the challenge. As the ship descended towards the surface of the planet, the crew gazed out at the world below them in wonder. It was unlike anything they had ever seen before. A world of breathtaking beauty and awe-inspiring vistas. They landed the ship on a flat, open plain, surrounded by towering mountains and shimmering lakes. The air was fresh and clean, and the ground beneath their feet was soft and spongy, like walking on a cloud. The crew stepped out of the ship and onto the alien landscape, their senses overwhelmed by the sights, sounds, and smells of this new world. They had arrived at their destination, but the adventure was far from over. As they set up camp and began to explore their surroundings, the crew felt a sense of excitement and wonder that they had not experienced in a long time. They were finally free to explore, to discover, to push the boundaries of what was possible. And as they gazed out at the endless expanse of this new world, they knew that they had embarked on a journey that would take them to the edge of exploration and beyond. Over the coming weeks, the crew of the ship explored the vast, alien landscape of the planet. They climbed mountains, crossed valleys, and waded through streams and rivers, taking samples of the flora and fauna and mapping the terrain as they went. At night, they sat around the campfire and shared stories of their adventures, marveling at the wonders they had seen and the mysteries they had yet to unravel. But as the days turned into weeks, the initial excitement and wonder began to give way to a growing sense of unease. The crew began to notice strange phenomena and unusual occurrences that they could not explain. In the distance, they saw bizarre, flickering lights that seemed to dance and swirl in the air, like luminous tendrils reaching out from the darkness. They heard strange, otherworldly sounds that echoed across the landscape, like the whispers of some ancient, eldritch force. And as they continued to explore, they began to realize that this planet was not entirely uninhabited. There were signs of intelligent life all around them, but they could not see or sense any beings that might be responsible for them. As the days went by, the crew became increasingly nervous and paranoid, jumping at shadows and seeing threats where there were none. They began to question their own sanity, wondering if the isolation and stress of the long journey had finally gotten to them. But despite their growing unease, they pressed on, determined to unravel the mysteries of this strange, alien world. And as they delved deeper into the unknown, they knew that they were approaching the edge of exploration, the boundary between the known and the unknown, the familiar and the alien. And beyond that boundary, they could sense something lurking in the darkness, something vast and ancient and terrible, waiting to be uncovered. They could feel its presence, like a shadow moving across the landscape, a warning of the perils that lay ahead. But they were explorers, pioneers, and adventurers, and they would not be deterred. They had come too far to turn back now, and they were ready to face whatever lay ahead, to push the boundaries of what was possible, and to discover the secrets of the universe. With each passing day, the crew of the ship grew more and more determined to uncover the mysteries of the planet. They spent long hours studying the samples they had collected, poring over maps and data, and debating theories and hypotheses. But the more they learned, the more questions they had. The planet seemed to defy explanation, with its strange and unpredictable weather patterns, its bizarre geological formations, and its seemingly intelligent life forms that remained stubbornly hidden from view. As the days turned into weeks, the crew grew more and more isolated from the outside world, their communication with the ship growing more and more sporadic and unreliable. They began to feel like they were living in a world unto themselves, cut off from the rest of humanity, with no one to turn to but each other. And in that isolation, they began to see things, to hear things, to sense things that they could not explain. They saw strange shadows moving across the landscape, heard voices whispering in their ears, felt cold fingers brushing against their skin. At first, they dismissed these phenomena as mere figments of their imagination, the result of the isolation and stress they had been under for so long. But as the phenomena continued and grew more intense, they began to realize that there was something else at work here, something that defied rational explanation. And then, one night, they saw something that left them all speechless, something that they could not dismiss or ignore. In the distance, they saw a great, glowing mass rising up from the ground, like a column of pure, white light stretching up into the sky. At first, they thought it might be some natural phenomenon, some strange, otherworldly aurora that they had never seen before. But as they watched, the column began to take on a more solid form, coalescing into a shape that they could almost recognize. And then, as suddenly as it had appeared, the column vanished, leaving the crew staring out into the darkness, wondering what they had just witnessed. For days after that, the crew was on edge, their nerves frayed and their minds racing with wild speculation. They knew that they had seen something incredible. Something that defied everything they thought they knew about the universe. And they knew that they had to find out more. They had to push further into the unknown, to explore the edges of the possible, and to uncover the secrets of the universe that lay just beyond their grasp.